Okay, well, we might get underway. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, wherever you are joining us from. I know we've got people joining from all parts of the country and even from some parts of the region too. So welcome, good afternoon for those in the West, good morning still. And welcome to the CrowdStrike and Sumo Logic Customer Forum on securing your cloud transformation with continuous intelligence. My name's Holly Ransom, and it's my distinct privilege to get to play host to this afternoon's conversation. I'm really looking forward to learning all about cybersecurity, about this critical component of the digital transformation strategy, and hearing some of the stories and the intricacies of transformations done well and just the value that they can add to your organization. I think it's also really interesting that we're having this conversation at this moment in time. I think if we've kind of observed anything in 2020, it's been the rapid acceleration in a lot of the digital transformation agendas, journeys, whatever your organization happens to be calling it. The COVID pandemic really shifted the move to remote work and digital strategies up the priority line. It forced us into these configurations of hybrid work environments and entirely digital environments that we hadn't ever found ourselves in before. And I think it's left a lot of people grappling for new ways to manage information, their system security, and everything in between. Just to that point, we gathered some really interesting data in the lead up to this conversation. The results from the survey that we've conducted said that over half of the organisations participating in today's forum, and there are over more than 500 of you that have signed up to be a part of the conversation today, which is great, have accelerated their digital transformation by at least 6 months as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, I heard the CEO of Microsoft earlier in the year say that from Microsoft's perspective, they thought that the pandemic had brought forward the digital transformation by about 2 years. So it's quite incredible to think about just that increase in pace of the transformation agenda. 60% of people, I found it interesting, said that their existing digital transformation plans did not take into account any of disruptive events of the nature like the one we've been thrust into in 2020. So that's interesting as well. I also found it intriguing some of the results regarding the spend on digital transformation. The average organisation was spending 8.44 million over the past 3 years, which is above the global average. But interestingly, an average of about 10.6% of that was actually on cybersecurity. So it's certainly not where the bulk of the budget for digital transformation has been going. And we will have a bit of a conversation with some of our attendees and participants today. To get on the same page, let's talk a little bit about the organisations that have brought us here today. CrowdStrike and Sumo Logic work together to identify security threats and defend against indicators of compromise in a hybrid environment. Customers can know the adversaries that are targeting their assets via strategic, operational and technical reporting and alerts. During this event, we're going to explore how Sumo Logic and CrowdStrike help prospects identify security threats, malicious actors, and indicators of compromise in multi-cloud environments. We're also going to hear from Australian private health provider NIB on their transformation journey and how Sumo Logic and CrowdStrike have helped them secure their digital transformation and their cloud workloads. Our hope in this conversation is that you leave today with a better understanding of cloud security and the available real-time reporting that can help you to identify threat actors who may be targeting your cloud environment. And also you can just think about the cybersecurity component of your digital strategy and some of the tools available to you to support you on that journey. I just want to encourage everyone who's participating in the conversation this afternoon to submit any questions that you might have, both coming into the conversation today and questions that are generated by the topics and ideas that our speakers are going to touch on. We'll come back and feature all of the speakers. There'll be 4 people presenting today in a kind of all-in panel later in the afternoon. And at that point, I'll be pulling questions from those that are submitted. So I really encourage you to get them in early so I can make sure that your burning question gets asked. So with that, we might kick off our conversation and get underway. And to do that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce, firstly, Sharif El-Abawi, the VP of Sales Engineering at CrowdStrike. Hello, Sharif. I love your background. I've already given you a compliment on how cool that looks earlier. And then I'm welcoming Paul Wilcox, Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific for Sumo Logic. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. All right, Sharif, I'm going to kick off with you. We talked a little bit about kind of the COVID context. I'm interested, with your ear to the ground, what are the conversations that customers have been having with you? What challenges are they talking to you about?
Definitely the first one was the rapid shift, which you mentioned earlier. The need to overnight shift all their employees back home, and at the same time, not the supply chain issues that they had with providing an actual ready made prepped secure laptops to their employers back home because of the supply chain issues. So what they ended up doing is they wanted time to value in terms of securing a quick deployment, and they wanted quick visibility and improved protection, something that was very hard for them to achieve with I would say the legacy products that they had in place, for a simple reason. The old way of relating back to a perimeter and a data center and backhauling all your traffic back home and applying your security controls before it's released back to your employees is not happening anymore. So employees were connecting directly to the internet, which was the main thing we worked with most of our customers, is how can we rapidly shift your digital transformation journey and enable it and have a secure transformation before you actually do that.
And Paul, I wanted to ask you, I mean, we touched on, and Sharif said it there as well, this kind of rapid acceleration of digital transformation. But has it fundamentally changed the nature of the need too? Like, are you having really different conversations with customers in 2020 to what you were in 2019?
I think we're probably having similar conversations, but they're much more frantic than what they used to be. As organisations have built up their infrastructure on premise, there is no premise to go to now. So these organisations are quickly moving up to the cloud, and they've got this influx of new information that they probably couldn't handle before or didn't understand. So that acceleration has multiplied the stress levels, I think. And a lot of the customers that we've spoken to, existing customers as well as new ones, trying to find tool sets to give them that same level of foundational understanding as what they had pre-COVID and certainly on-premise.
So this is, I think, a topic, and we've got all variety of people coming to this conversation today with varying degrees of exposure, background, and professionalism in this topic. To question to both of you, what are the smart questions or the best questions that people who are handling this well are asking of themselves and their organisation? What do people joining the conversation today need to be checking back of house is in order from their standpoint?
I think I'll take that, Paul, first. So I think from our side is really when we engage in those kind of discussions, normally the first thing that comes is a discussion between the CIO and the CISO, and we're in the middle where we're saying the CIO wants and has the mandate to go digital now. Their 2-year or 3-year plan has to be implemented in 2 weeks. We had actual examples of that. And then we're asked, how can we secure that? And sometimes it's a gamble if there's not that discussion and open integration between the CIO or CISO if they're not the same function. And we get in the middle and we explain to them that there is ways to do that, quick ways to do this with an increased level of protection without compromising your journey. So, and we have seen actually organizations that take the gamble and go digital completely, and then they catch up from a security perspective. So the first question would be, how can I secure that digital transformation? And it's easy to break it up into elements and understand where your workloads are and secure those workloads. Because at the end of the day, the securing the perimeter is the core thing we've all worked on from a legacy perspective, but that has changed. The networks are no longer there. And we're talking about an endpoint, whether that is physical or a workload, whether it's in a cloud, a container, or an AWS, Azure, whatever it is, workload that we're securing. So how can I secure the digital transformation would be the first question normally that we would get in that discussion.
All right, so how I secure the digital transformation. Paul, have you got one you'd like to add to that mix?
Yeah, look, I think there's a general fear in moving to the cloud for those that haven't done it pragmatically, for those that are forced into it. So it needs to be, how can you make me more comfortable with this move? At risk of sounding jingoistic, it's a paradigm shift, and it's really uncomfortable for a lot of organizations. So it needs to be an outcomes-based conversation rather than a technology-based conversation. How can we deliver this solution to our internal customers and our external customers? When we get down to the crux of that, we can always work backwards to make that easier and give them the visibility. But it's really important to understand what the company is going to try and achieve by doing this, and also some of the advantages in that massive move to cloud, which allows you to scale infinitely.
I think that's such a good point about the kind of complement or that need for how do you make me more comfortable, whether that's lack of understanding and information. And so what do I need to provide internal stakeholders, external stakeholders with to kind of bridge that comfort divide? Or to your point, what are the outcomes I need to demonstrate, the value this can add to our business? Does it surprise either of you, that statistic that I said that about 10.6% of the budget is going to cybersecurity? Is that what you broadly observe, that this is an underinvested in area given the criticality of it to system security?
I think this, sorry, Paul.
You go first. You go first.
No worries. From our side, it's not the value, because it's always a percentage of the budget that we've normally seen between 6 to 7% in the past years. It has increased gradually, specifically in this year, but it's beyond the budget. It's the reality of what we're seeing in the threat landscape increasing. The surface is actually increasing because of the fact we were all office based. Hence, there was all focus on data centers, and there was all focus on on-prem. Securing your on-prem, but now there is basically that completely dissolved, and we're all from our work. So all our work points, all our Wi-Fi's, all our owned BYODs devices are ours, and they need securing, which increases the attack surface. So the reality is, it's natural with that to look at different aspects and verticals where you can actually increase the attacks. Hence, you need to have more security controls. You need to work on your risk posture and understand what are the new risks being introduced into that new model, and then work on it backwards and understand the budget that would need to secure that. So the increase is natural, and specifically in a time like this.
Paul, if I can throw you a different question, I'm interested in the work I do in transformation. I always think, what's the biggest misunderstanding, or kind of the logic that you wish you could burst the bubble of? And one of the things for me is always this piece where I think people expect that things are going to calm down and stabilize again, and we'll have the ability to come up for air and breathe and quietly plan. And I think it challenges a lot of people to say, actually, this is probably the slowest pace of change. In fact, we know it's the slowest pace of change we're ever going to see in our lifetime, this moment right now. What for you is the biggest misunderstanding in your line of work? What do you wish you could correct?
In the context of this conversation, in the context of cybersecurity, I think the biggest misconception is that it exists in a vacuum. That it is, we'll buy more tools and we'll buy some more stuff and we'll do this differently. That's not necessarily the case. I think there's a cultural change that's going on, and people may not be aware of it, but there's an integration of cyber into a lot of the stuff we do. So whilst you said before, 10% of budget is going to cybersecurity, there's other aspects of security that are being played with right now, and people doing DevSecOps, so as they develop applications, and we're a very application-centric world today. As they develop those applications, there's a lot more foundational and fundamental view of how secure that is and how it works. So it's about looking beyond that narrow road that says this is cybersecurity, and starting to look at how other aspects of your organization can engage in that and make it foundationally better rather than just at symptomatic level.
That's such a great insight, and I think one that's sometimes easier said than done in terms of implementing. Sharif, do you have any suggestions for people in terms of how to take that integrated approach and bring it to life? Any observations you've made of leaders in businesses you work with that you've seen do this well?
I think that it's the inception of our company from the start was based on this model, which is being in the cloud 100%, born in the cloud for the cloud. Was the idea there was we can't rely on on-prem technologies, and to get that integration, you need something that is extremely scalable, and the scalability of the cloud could be endless with additional storage, additional computation power, etc. So the integration is more enabled if you are working completely from a cloud prem and focusing on the connecting to the sensors on the actual machines, and then integrating with all other vendors that work closely to give that best in breed to the customer in an API or in a platform way, similar to what we work with Sumo Logic here. We work with others, and the idea is to create a platform where customers can plug in easily and use that ingest this data into their workflows and be able to apply the same rules. Instead of doing it multiple times with multiple bloated agents, why don't you use the same data and be able to ingest and digest it into your platforms?
Brilliant. Paul, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think what Sharif said there is a really important point. Is there's a lot of stuff being created today. There's a lot of information that's being created today, and more often than not, it's duplicated many times within an organization. It's really important to normalize that as much as possible and make it far more easier to digest. Computers should be used for that. The cloud should be used for that. The attackers are using computers. We're using humans. And we've all seen Terminator. It didn't work out too well. So, you know, we need to use computers more to crunch through these numbers as much as possible so the attackers with computers don't overrun us.
And you're so right that so much stuff has been created. There's also so much information and noise and misinformation, which I feel like has been one of the themes of the last couple of years. Where do you two turn for your insights? What do you read? What do you follow? What blogs are you checking? Just always find it really interesting, leaders who are at the forefront of this field. Who are you following and seeking to turn to for points of light, inspiration, insight?
I'll start with my side. I mean, everything from the register to our security blogs from top security vendors and companies and researchers is something that I always go to. But the main understanding that I like to get from the field is really from analyst reports to understand where we're positioned, where others are positioned, and what the value and where the trends as in the market are going towards. But in reality, at the end of the day, if I'm in an organization and I'm protecting, I need to understand what everything is my vertical. What are the threat actors that are acting on this vertical? What are their tactics, techniques, and procedures? Their indications of attacks, and I need to be able to again understand how do I protect myself. So an example that we're all facing now, we're seeing here across APAC, for example, is the healthcare. We need to understand with the vaccine development companies, etc. There's a lot of actual attacks happening. So when a health organization talks to us, they will talk about, you know, tell me about what's happening in the industry. We need to guide them to certain reports, to certain threat actors, and explain to them from the threat intelligence of CrowdStrike and from what we're seeing from our threat graph globally, what the patterns are. So to me, the key thing is if you are an organization, you have to follow up with your actual peers, create that community that will be able to share, whether that is actually, you know, through meeting or through the actual frameworks that you've got in place, to be able to share those indicators and help together to create that community immunity, which is something, by the way, we do by default in our product and services capabilities.
Fantastic. I love that point that it's not just general knowledge, it's actually deeply contextual knowledge that is so valuable and so critical. Paul, did you want to jump in and add anything?
Yeah, look, it's very, very similar to Sharif, Holly. We have our own sort of sources of information that are industry-wide. We tend to sort of get bounced around in there and they become echo chambers in some respects. So most of the interesting stuff comes from when you talk to customers. When they tell you, I've got this problem, and you go, wow, I haven't seen that before. This is different. And to Sharif's point about context, you know, different attackers have different reasons for attacking you. They may be hacktivists. They may be people looking to, you know, steal intellectual information. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on and a whole lot of reasons. It's finding out the context to determine how best to protect against it or how to react when it does in fact happen.
Absolutely. Now, I'm conscious of the time. We've got to move to our next segment of the program. But one of the things I did want to do before we close, I know so much is on your radar, you're thinking about so much, but in the context of this conversation, the people we're talking to today, if you could leave them with one key takeaway or the thing that's keeping you up at night or the question you're asking, what would you love them to leave this part of our conversation thinking about?
I think from my side, I would definitely ask them to relook at the challenges in this age and not rely on where we all come from the same backgrounds, not rely on your old legacy way of thinking, because now is a very different way. And to be able to get that time to value and increase protection that you need, you will need to think in a similar way because the attack surface is completely different.
Great point. Ditch the legacy mindset and make sure you're up to date with your needs assessment. What about Paul? What would you like to add?
Similar to Sharif, but I'd say think about doing this at scale. When you test this stuff out, when you have a go at a new technology, when you do something to increase your posture, generally you do it in a very small vacuum. That's not the way stuff works in real life. When you get attacked, it happens at scale. Noise happens, information happens. That's why it's important to understand that cloud leverage to be able to scale up your faux infrastructure, if you like, to infinite levels. When it goes bad big. So get ready for that and be prepared to be on a platform that scales up with the cloud rather than with how many boxes you plug into your organization.
I like that. Get ready for big. Thank you both so much for your opening comments. You're both going to join us again later. So those who are listening who have questions for Sharif, for Paul, for both of them, please submit that in the Q&A and we'll get to as many of those later in the program as we can. But thank you both for the moment. And I'm now going to welcome Mitch Brindle, who's the Cloud Operations Manager at NIB, and Robbie Williams, who is not the popular British pop star, but in fact the Cybersecurity Manager, very popular, I'm sure still, at NIB as well. Welcome, guys. You're going to share with us part of the journey of how you've secured NIB's digital transformation and cloud workloads. So take it away. I'm going to hand it over to you because I think you've got a presentation to talk us through first.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Holly. So we have to go back in time a little bit here. So we're going back to 2015. So back in 2015, NIB was still on-prem. We hadn't moved to AWS yet. We were essentially just a run-of-the-mill on-prem shop. We had web servers, application, the database. Like everything, they all log. One problem that we had, which back then I was an engineer in the team too, so I faced this firsthand, was that when something went wrong or when application was performing slow, you had to go and chase the logs. You had to go and find what server, what node, what instance, whatever it may be, and you had to go and do that. The problem with that is it just doesn't scale. You can't, add more nodes and then expect the logs to go to the same place or to a unified area. But the one thing that NIB did do well in 2015 was we did log. We logged everything. And that was the source of the problem, is that when you're logging everything you can log to multiple different places, you have to go looking for that information. So when we decided to talk about our cloud transformation to AWS, we needed to solve that problem ASAP. Because if we were going to move to a scalable environment, we wanted it to be able to also scale with logs. So we have a central point where we can do any troubleshooting or anything that we need from that single pane of glass. But part of our transformation wasn't a big bang. It wasn't a lift and shift. It wasn't really anything that can be done overnight. So we needed something that was a hybrid approach. So we needed a solution that was able to still keep our on-premise infrastructure logging appropriately, getting collected, getting ingested, getting all that stuff, but then also being able to support our new applications being built in AWS with AWS technologies as well. So that was essentially our problem. And when we went to market for this, there was one key company that stood out at the time, and that was Sumo Logic. So what that has been able to provide to us is essentially a unified logging solution for our on-prem infrastructure and AWS. Because NIB is still on that journey of moving everything into AWS, and it's now 2020, we have also pivoted technologies in AWS. So when we first moved to AWS, services weren't available like they are today, for example, Fargate. So we had to have a system or a logging solution that essentially could keep up with us or enable us to use the technologies that the business at NIB needed to be able to deploy the best assets that they can to our AWS environment. However, speaking about on-prem still, we still needed a product that could still ingest logging that could possibly have a connection to these new AWS assets. So if you think of a product doesn't necessarily consist of one application. A product would have many applications or many different tiering that when those logs come together, they can tell essentially a story or they can paint a picture. So if we have logs coming in from an on-prem asset through to AWS, we then want to be able to provide that basically data to the business. And that's one thing that Sumo has enabled us to do, is essentially take these logs from many different sources, put them into the one place, which is great. But the problem with having it all in one place is now that, well, how do you present that? How do you make that usable data? So that's where dashboarding comes into it. And this is probably one of the biggest wins that, I personally, having, been an engineer in the team, having built dashboards and etc., to be able to even make, as a technical user's life easy, where you can make a health dashboard as an example. But when you can provide a dashboard that's for business users, not so much technical users, personally, that's where I feel a lot of value comes into the piece, because you're then taking a technical basically solution and giving it to a business lens, right? So that's something that NIB leverages a lot, because when you can illustrate basically your text-based logs as a dashboard or a photo or whatever it may be, that can be used in many different avenues there. So that's essentially where NIB's got to today with the Sumo lens. So we obviously are still pushing the envelope. We at NIB, we're constantly using new and emerging tech in AWS, and Sumo's been able to keep up with us through our AWS journey. So I'll pass over to Robbie to talk about.
Just on Sumo, just to put a bit of a cyber lens on that as well. It's so helpful when it comes to attack scenarios to help investigate requests across apps, our auth, pulling stories together of what actions an attacker is trying to take. It's so much easier when it's all in the one place, and as you said, we can pull entire stories, event timelines together in a consistent way, and support our incident response teams. With Sumo, basically, it enables us to focus on the event more than the challenge of producing the logs to investigate an event, and it has an incredibly powerful querying language to support us during those exercises. But just to move on to a bit of a endpoint protection sort of lens now. I'll try and do this without sounding like a salesman, but it's a pretty good news story, so bear with me. Look, this is protecting the endpoints in the old world. Like, the history of our endpoint protection, it's probably pretty familiar to most organizations. Like any mid-tier enterprise, we've got a complex, multifaceted environment, and we're on our way through our cloud journey, as we've said. Pre-CrowdStrike, we had a complexity of consoles and technologies supporting endpoint protection. We even had a split in our EPP console versions for one of the products, just because workstations naturally progress on to a later version of their OSs before other service workloads. We had a dependency on our VPN for the continuous function of that control. And as the environment grew, and we found our old EPP technologies, they weren't form fit for new stacks, particularly cloud. So we invested in something else to fill that gap. And what we ended up with was a raft of staggered technology investments, some inconsistencies and merging in policies. Admins had to be experts of too much. We had rough and infrequent maintenance windows, older admin consoles ground to a halt, and generally our confidence in the protection afforded was lowered. Some other problems we ran into, endpoint protection was traditionally treated as a commodity service. So we all thought of it like it scans for malware, it manages a firewall. Maybe it has a few bibs and bobs on top, things like reputation filtering, but there was no true EDR capability offered by any of the investments. And that increases, the window to contain and the overall time to remediate a security event. We had some account management issues as well, and that's because it's difficult from both the vendor and NIB's perspective. No single investment would afford a strong enough relationship, and multiple points of account management and support. It complicated most things. So finally, when the straw broke the camel's back, we went to market. We went to market to unify and modernize our EDR platform. And after market testing, we found CrowdStrike to be the most form fit and strategically aligned for us. We could protect ourselves on our cloud journey, as well as the end-user compute and the legacy environment during the transformation. Its breadth of and it has a huge range of support for different systems, and that meant that we could cover all workloads with these lightweight agents. The rollout was pretty simple. Our market exercise emphasized the importance of a strong partnership to participate in the end-to-end delivery, and the solution provider, Heirloom, executed a smooth deployment, working tightly with our teams. The rollout was simple, as simple as it gets. Of course, every environment's different, but we're lucky to have an IT operations team at NIB that sets us up for success, and Mitch is on that team. You know, and the rollout strategy was simple as well. The agents, they can roll out side by side. So we rolled them out side by side safely with the existing AV, and in stages we just removed pockets of the EPP, the old EPP. When it was all done, like you could feel the relief. We were getting consistent, continuous protection for every compute everywhere. And it's so important during these times when we've got a highly distributed workforce now. We've got a centralized managed platform to support an EDR capability. We've got radically improved visibility into detections. We don't have to look up things like what's a W32 generic Trojan mean anymore. The detail is unlike anything else. You can see down to the detail of things like process operations, IOPS, DNS, and network traffic, registry changes. You can see exactly what happened in the detection chain. We have a policy framework that's now tag driven that enables us to apply different types of protections to different workloads. And we use this to do things like we restrict active response to our production server workloads because we govern those in a certain way. It's got a good cloud concept awareness, which means you know, protection isn't affected by our elasticity. That means like our licensing and the platform itself, it works well with concepts like ephemerality and auto scaling. And now we have a fully managed threat hunting capability through Falcon Overwatch, or beyond our next gen AV. We've had plenty of examples where internal pen testing engagements have been tripped up as they tried to build custom payloads against CVEs within our environment. Network containment is, in the olden days, that would have meant you turn off your laptop, you might mail it in to us if you're quite remote, and we'll put it on a contained segmented network for interrogation. Nowadays, it's the press of a button. The agent will constrain the network traffic. It's all configurable, so you can configure exactly which allowable addresses are in the list, so that we can allow configuration management tools, for example, and allow us to actively respond to the machine through the response web shell as well, you know, wherever it is. And you know, lastly, the account management is hugely improved. We have proactive engagements as new threats emerge. We have monthly health checkups, ensuring we get the most out of our platform, and there's a real sense of engagement from the partnership as our account manager learns about our environment. So I know I said I didn't want to sound like a salesman, but this is what we have now, and it's a pretty good story. Just this last slide is, I don't know how well people can see that because it seems to be missing a bunch of things, but I'll talk about it anyway. This last slide, I just wanted to talk about how these technologies fit into our cybersecurity framework at NIB, and we'll add a little color about what value they provide. So at NIB, we use an augmentation of the NIST CSF to help us design, build, maintain, govern our cyber capability. Sumo and CrowdStrike are the kinds of technologies that play a significant role across a range of those functions. While Sumo is passively used by cyber to monitor and govern the efficacy of many of our deployed controls, including CrowdStrike, we also use it to adapt contextually to security events and rapidly deploy powerful queries and alerting for assets. Its core features are super important to any investigation. We have fast, reliable, immutable, centralized logs to interrogate in any way you can imagine. And it's such a powerful query language. We often do a manual load of some data once off here and there just so that we can query it there. When we talk about CrowdStrike, for NIB, it's a relatively young investment and one that continues to demonstrate its value time and time again. I've talked a bit enough about its features, well, the features that are important to NIB, and you can see, you know, it does cover quite the breadth across the CSF. But just to reiterate, it's CrowdStrike it's so much more than just an antivirus and a firewall management. It's a full response platform to handle incidents and a black box with an enormity of detail about your endpoints. that's pretty much everything I want to talk about with regards to those two.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate the really detailed walkthrough of how you've used both software. And I think for me, it was really interesting, and everyone will have taken their own insights from what was shared, but just that power of detailed real-time information, the piece around the simplicity of the rollout. Mitch, you were talking a little bit, at the start, just regarding, how significant a role it's played in just overall that ability to take a technical solution and turn it into a business output. We can take a dashboard and all of a sudden educate a broader audience, not just confine that to the tech team. Sharif and Paul, I might bring you back in at this point because I'm really intrigued for the both of you, having sat and listened, and this would not be the first time you've heard customers talk about their customer journey with your products, but just would love your feedback and observations on what was shared. Paul, I might go to you first.
Oh, before Sharif. Okay, that's good.
Switching the order up, going crazy here.
Help me out here, Holly. Look, I think it's a really good example of how our two solutions work together. It's about visibility. It's about protection. It's about looking at not just at good and bad, but anomalous activity. So, it's really, really important, especially in the case of NIB, where it's giving them the opportunity to look at this stuff at a very, very narrow level rather than this broad, overburdened information that most organizations get, and then having the ability to act on it. So it's a very, very cool understanding of how they use the two technologies and solutions together.
Awesome. Sharif, what would you like to add?
I like the slides in general, and I love the fact that 2 points that were mentioned by our NIB team here is the fact of majority of the solutions out there use multi-consoles, and that's a pain for a majority of our clients. It doesn't enable you to, at the time of rapid shifts and changes like the crisis we're in, to be able to develop new policies, to update your agents or your technologies quickly. So that to me is something that resonates with a lot of customers. Is with other solutions, there's always multiple consoles and it's not hard. You need one console, cloud-based, that you're able to go back to. That always something that is close to my heart, because I've seen it. I've been part of previous companies where I've been having multiple consoles, and it's not easy to shift rapidly to that model.
Absolutely.
Sharif. And just to add to that, like in the heat of the moment, simplicity is your best friend.
Yeah.
I believe that. And boys, I've got a question for you. Might come to you first, and then Paul and Sharif, I'll give you the opportunity to come in as well. But it was asked during your NIB presentation, how can this help, or how has this helped you in reducing ransomware attack impacts specifically? Happy for either of you to take that or respond in general.
Robbie, do you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's significantly improved our posture against ransomware, in that we're able to cover the breadth of the workloads that we have, and the technology itself has an awareness of more than just the known ransomware. Its behavior monitoring gives that extra level of confidence. That we're going to be covered in the event of something new and something unknown that hits the NIB network.
Anything anyone would like to add to that?
I would just like to add that CrowdStrike approach when it comes to ransomware is very thorough and detailed for our customers. We talk them through a step-by-step policy. The approach in general is really about stopping an actual ransomware from infecting the system and encrypting the files. Before that process is executed, how do we enable the prevention at the start, whether it's online, offline, the machine itself? And we talk our customers through a step-by-step on the policy in detail on how to stop that. So it's something that really CrowdStrike has been very focused on in terms of ransomware attacks. And we're proud to say, even with our breach detection, that none of our customers has suffered the breach.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Holly, I think ransomware, or whether we look at ransomware or you look at state-based attacks, whatever it might be, the traditional view of looking at, bad looks like this and good looks like this, those days are gone, because they're retrospective protection. Where we need to be looking today, and this is where CrowdStrike and Sumo Logic do a great job together, is looking at anomalies, looking at what's different now than what was different 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 seconds ago. And in looking at, you know, when the graph does this and then suddenly peaks up, it's about getting that massive amount of information and looking at what's different. And when something looks different, then generally it's wrong. So it allows people to get down to the core of a problem or look at a compromise taking place much better than what they have in the past.
Brilliant. I was just thinking to myself, I'm not sure if it's problematic or fitting that someone with the last name Ransom is moderating a conversation about ransomware. So we'll leave that one there for the minute. We've got another question that's come in from the audience. The question is, or the phrasing is, the name of the game is speed, as the perpetrators use tools, tech, procedures to get a foothold in IT estates very quickly. So how quickly do these platforms work to generate and ingest logs, analyze them, and remediate action, or suggest actions taken to remediate that? Maybe Mitch, we might go to you guys first, just in terms of a customer experience, to give us some real-time insight into how that's worked for you, and then again, Sharif and Paul, I'll come to you.
Sure. So just from the logs, I guess all of our ingestions are real time. So when we have a dashboard or anything, that data is coming in hot and live. Like, there's no delay there at all. And it's interesting that when we talk about these attacks and speed and that, like NIB, we actually had a false positive where we were able to act very quickly to isolate an instance that CrowdStrike had I identified as possibly infiltrated, and granted it was a false positive, but those logs, those rules, those were live. Like, there was no delay when we looked at the logs on the box to the logs in CrowdStrike, or even in Sumo as well. They were to the second. They were basically on point. So we don't see any delay from our perspective, and we haven't experienced any either.
I remember that specific event you're talking about, and I just in preparation had a quick read over it last night just to reflect on it, and that was we picked up that alert almost immediately. It's all real time, right? Effectively real time, or near real time, and we managed to pick up the alert, convene an incident response team, and contain the offending machine all within 20 minutes. And it didn't take that long for us to pull in a security services partner and do a bit of interrogation on logs and get a degree of comfort that it was more of a misconfiguration. But that kind of rapidity was unprecedented for us.
So that was week one of CrowdStrike.
Yeah, wow.
Week one. So and this was when we pulled in the incident team and we went through the whole process. The run books that we had for an incident like this, and yeah, it was having that one single pane of glass where you just go to the one place and you can do whatever you need in that one place, instead of having multiple tabs open, browsers and stuff, or apps. It was fantastic from an ops perspective.
Paul, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'm going back in time in my head. Most people could tell from my face, I've been doing this for 250 years. So if you look back at what we used to do, it was about putting a seam in place, and we would talk about how quickly that would work and how many events per minute or second that could go through. Those days are really gone. To Mitch's point, it happens. There's an immediacy to the crunching of the data. You can only do that on technologies that are built on a cloud platform. And I just want to be clear to most of the attendees. When I say that, I don't mean taking an on-premise product and putting it in a single instance in a cloud. That's not cloud. I talk about the way that CrowdStrike and Sumo Logic have done it across multi-tenant. So basically leveraging the power of the entire cloud to work for you. That's how you get that real-time response. And it's a super important thing to take notice of, because that's what's changed today as to what's happened yesterday and the day before.
Sharif, did you want to add anything?
Yes, one quick one is, like in CrowdStrike, specifically we've released in the last 2 years, we've been tracking all the threat actors, nation state specifically, and we've got timing for the average of how long would it take a Russian threat affiliated threat actor versus a North Korean versus a Chinese, etc. And we help our customers to understand that definitely speed is the key here, and we provide them with metrics to say, in order for you to be able to tackle that problem, And to stop attacks, we work on what we call a 1-10-60 benchmark rule that has been uncovered by our services, complete and threat hunting teams, and obviously our threat graph technologies, to give you basically the ability to detect an attack in 1 minute, be able to investigate and understand everything around it, where specifically understanding the IOCs and the IOAs involved, and then contain and remediate the actual incident within 60 minutes. We believe that this is a working formula in terms of time. And if you map that back to all the reports that are global about the average and median time it takes a threat actor to be able to infiltrate and attack your network is a key point here. And if you refer it to the example that Mitch and Robbie mentioned earlier, I think the 20 minutes falls within that. Is the detection is key here. If you can detect it quickly, real time, it's in front of you. It gives you time to have the processes and at the end of the day, it's not only technology in part of this, right? The SOPs and everything that you have in your SOC and incident, the response team will be helping that to enable this. But definitely, we work with our customers on a benchmark of stopping attacks within that time frame.
Yeah, I think our questioner had it right. That speed is absolutely of the essence. Sharif, before we move on, I've got another question for you that's come through. How does CrowdStrike help on serverless architectures where organizations only have to worry about the applications or containers?
We are currently on a roadmap. We have focus on the serverless architecture. Currently, we protect everything from an endpoint, workloads, containers, and then the serverless architectures on our cloud, on our roadmap in the future.
Robbie, Mitch, I'm going to come to you. One, like listening to your journey, it's incredible. And I think Paul and Sharif already complimented you on just what good a job you've done in your organizational transformation. I'm sure a lot of people listening today are somewhere can resonate with the journey that you've been on. They're either in the thick of it themselves, they're thinking about that 21's got that in store for them, or somewhere in between. What advice have you got on the digital transformation done well? Any lessons from the road type of comments or insights that you can share?
Probably one that's probably not so technical, but probably work with the product teams that are going to be moving to the cloud. Like it's not a IT driven thing from my opinion. It's got to be a business decision, because you have to essentially migrate workloads, which needs effort, needs FTE, it needs whatever it may be to get those workloads up there. But I guess when they're there, the job's not done. So just because you're going into AWS, Azure, or anywhere, right? Just because your workloads are there doesn't mean that's the last of them. It's like if you think back when we were doing P2Vs to for VMware, right? Everyone for VMware, virtualized, job done. Now we're turning all that off and we're going to cloud. So the job isn't done once you're in the cloud. So look at technologies, keep your ear to the ground around what's new and emerging, because once things are in the cloud, then it's all around cost. How can we have the same stuff up there, but it costs less? And modular. Just make things in terms of services from an IT perspective, just make it modular, so that way you aren't restrained to one technology. You can move and shift as the business, dictates.
Great. Robbie, what would you add?
I'd probably resonate most of what Mitch has just said. Yeah, and to be aware of the direction and the strategy your business is taking when you're looking to protect your workloads. The kinds of patterns and stacks that you'll be working with, and setting yourself up strategically for success.
Fantastic. Sharif, I'm going to come back to you. Another CrowdStrike question that's come through. With regards to a fully air-gapped environment, how would you recommend CrowdStrike to secure this?
Definitely. We work similar to how we work with Sumo Logic here. We work with other partners like Dragos and others in the IOS and the ICS IoT field to be able to bridge that gap. So for whoever asked the question, I'll be more than happy if you can email us your email. We can drive you to a number of white papers of how we do that with our partners.
Fantastic. All right, we'll take that one offline. Brilliant. We have another question that's come through, and I'm not sure which part of our conversation it was specifically in reference to, but perhaps the NIB boys could answer this. How often is the new thread injected into the script to identify potential threats? I get the sense from our conversation it's pretty instant in terms of the real-time information exchange there, but did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
How often is a new threat? Sorry, could you repeat the question?
How often is the new threat injected into the script to identify potential threats? Is the way that the question's been written. That doesn't make much sense. We can move right along. I do my best to interpret the way these have been written. So forgive me for those who asked the question if I haven't quite read that right.
How often is a new thread injected into the script to identify potential threats? Look, I'm not quite sure what that question means. I mean, it's all I can say is you know, from identifying potential threats, there's two kind of stages where we can see security events being raised. We can see them as detections, and there's something that is immediate. As soon as it happens, we get an immediate notification, and then there's a kind of a promotion to an incident, which can be a chain of detections. There's been more or less had a validation or a set of eyes run over it to say these are linked up, and these are a linked set of threats, which will obviously take a little bit longer. But as far as the actual threat detection and the blockage of any known threats, it's immediate. It's instant.
Great. Now I'm conscious that we're wrapping up and getting towards the end of our session. I'm very interested, given the fact we have 4 people that interface day in, day out with these sorts of issues and challenges, and also opportunities for that matter. I'd just be really interested to turn our minds to the 12 months ahead. In 2021, what trends are you watching for? What challenges and changes are you anticipating that you've got on your radar as a leader? I might work left to right on my screen. So Mitch, I'll come to you first. What are you watching, paying attention to in 2021?
Probably just technology trends as well. So, you know, speaking earlier around how do we keep up to speed with stuff, it's more around sort of us providing a platform to NIB. So essentially it's around what services are happening, what we can do in that cloud space, but then also how can we work with vendors as well to ensure that, you know, those platforms are coming along with our internal ones as well. That's probably the main one. And obviously as well, how can, you know, we, you know, continue our platforms in a way that, you know, they can be worked upon, access really anywhere. So, you know, this kind of decentralized working environment at the moment, right? We want to make sure that everything's accessible everywhere. Great.
Robbie?
Yeah, look for the near future, I think you know, we've deployed all these amazing technologies to support all this incident response and detection and whatnot. And you know, there's definitely an uplift in the bad side of the world where ransomware is running rampant at the moment and making everybody shaking their boots a little bit. And there's definitely, you know, alongside the deployment of any technologies like this, there's a huge consideration for the kinds of playbooks that you have in place, your ransomware policy. What's your stance on an event if your worst day comes, effectively, and yeah, I mean, just getting prepared for those moments, or ensuring that you're not only prepared but you're tested as well.
Can I just ask a follow-up question on that? You know, I imagine part of that's policy. Is part of that also almost running trials, like the equivalent of fire drills in the business, to make sure and test organizational capability and responsiveness?
Absolutely, game days, yeah. So we work with security services partners to set up game days and run through them. So we're well practiced within our organization, using the tools as well to support us, so that we know on the day, we're comfortable that if we need to go and get some information, we know exactly how to get it. And this you know, bringing it back to what we were saying way back at the beginning with Sharif, you know, a singular console simplifies that whole task. You don't have to be the expert of too many things.
And Robbie, can I ask, in terms of the cadence your business runs game day with, for those who that might not be part of their rhythm yet, how regularly do you do that?
Oh, we run a few a year, I would say. Probably quarterly, something in that area.
Fantastic.
It's sort of not all around that security space too. So with our game days, it's kind of it could be anything. So that's where we, you know, like having these products where you got that single source, is that when we do these things and we bring in other, even non-technical people come to these as well, because, you know, a product spans more than technical, you know, assets, right? So, you know, we bring in a lot of different people, and having that single pane is just fantastic.
And that's one of the big takeaways I've certainly taken from your conversation, is that piece and the importance of having something that can transcend from very technical experts to the broader business, and have that wider application, also that accessibility for others to be able to contribute in. Paul, I might come to you now. What are you watching for in 2021?
I think what's happened in the past 6 months, and is certainly accelerating a lot, is the way that people are building applications. So it's now far more driven around containerization. It's far more driven around portability and standing stuff up really quick. So it's understanding from a cyber perspective how that impacts your environment. The stuff that we used to use on big monolithic apps just doesn't work in a containerized environment. So we've got a lot of organizations right now sort of asking us to help them through that, and asking us to give them visibility into what's going on in those environments. And that's probably one of the biggest sort of paradigm shifts that's happened this year.
Fantastic. Sharif, what about you?
I think it's the added layer of people beyond the technology, is the ability to understand that no technology will provide 100% protection. You must have threat hunting capabilities. Now, whether your partnership within your organization with other orgs or vendors, or whether you build that in-house, I think in the rapid shift to the home or work from anywhere now, we've seen a lot of attacks that are highly sophisticated campaigns. I mean, our Overwatch threat hunting team has uncovered in the first 2 quarters of this year more than what they've uncovered in the whole of last year. The point here is threat hunting is a key aspect, and you need to use all those fantastic tools that Robert was mentioning there, and try to relate them back to your actual processes and people to go to the next level. Like, if it's beyond technology, how can I detect it?
I like that. It's beyond technology. How do I detect it? Well, with that, we're going to have to wrap up our customer forum. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, Mitch, Robbie, Paul, and Sharif, for joining us, for sharing your insights. Hope everyone listening has really taken away not just the questions they should be thinking about, from, you know, how do I secure my transformation, through to how do I get more comfortable with this journey that we're going on, right the way through to those deep insights that Robbie and Mitch shared on their own transformation journey, the questions, challenges, and benefits they've realized through that piece. And I hope it has better prepared you, you know, not only for the journey that you're in the thick of right now, but keeping that eye to the horizon in 2021 for the new challenges and new opportunities that you need to be ready to respond to. With that, I'm going to bring our forum to an end. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us in this conversation. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. And a big thank you to all of the CrowdStrike and Sumo Logic team for all the incredible volume of work behind the scenes that has made today possible. It's been a pleasure to host the conversation, and I wish all of you a wonderful festive season and a happy start to a brand new year. Hope it's a great one. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.